I'm Kathryn Zox. You're a social worker with a microphone, and you're listening to VoiceAmericaVariety.com and World Talk Radio. David Fetterman is my second guest this morning. He's president and CEO of Fetterman and Associates, which is an international evaluating consulting firm. And he's author. His new book is Empowerment Evaluation in the Digital Villages. Welcome to the show, David. Nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so your book is, as I understand it, it's about a large-scale, comprehensive initiative having to do with three major cities here in the United States. So what is that initiative? What's it all about? What have you been evaluating?
Yeah, it's actually, in a sense, a test of human resilience fundamentally, but technically it's really evaluating how to bridge the digital divide in communities of color. So HP put a lot of money, resources, people, you name it, into these different cities, and basically tried to help them bridge that digital divide, building small businesses. In the case of the tribal digital village, which is about 18 or 19 Native American tribes in San Diego, building one of the largest wireless systems in the country and a digital printing press, things of that nature, reaching out to communities and making sure laptops are available to the kids and to teachers to help transform the educational process. That's what this is all about. It's really...
So two questions, David. You identified three cities: East Palo Alto, California, East Baltimore, and San Diego.
Right.
That they were the cities here in the United States that were were suffering from this digital divide. You want to just kind of describe what the digital divide is?
Yeah. It's basically folks that were left behind, in a sense, folks that didn't really have much access, didn't see much need for access, and as a consequence had no resource, no access in this regard. And this is critical for jobs, education, even entertainment, and keeping up with where the culture is going, as it were.
So how did you identify these three cities, though? Because, I can think of others besides, or in addition to, I guess, major cities that also suffer from this digital divide, which keeps them from, as you say, getting jobs, improving their education, health, all of those kinds of things.
Yeah, they had to actually write proposals and actually enter a competition. So that meant that they technically had to be capable of writing a proposal, which, as you know, is not an easy task, have some interest in technology, even if it's a fledgling interest in helping, using that as a tool to become more self-determined. And then they had to succeed as far as an actual site visit to see if they could actually probably pull this off. So it was a competition in that regard. At the same time, HP was interested in seeing what would be interesting in different enough cities, different environments, to see if it could work in different places and then, of course, be replicated or at least moved into different communities that were similar.
So in other words, you had a real comprehensive group of people or a group of institutions, Stanford, Hewlett-Packard, $15 million to accomplish all of this. Yeah,
basically, we came in, it was very interesting. I was actually working on a different project, just as a quick aside, that was about a $5 million project in East Palo Alto, and it was on a similar kind of tack, but these sponsors didn't think we were moving fast enough, so they actually took it away from everyone, which is basically felt like a lot of black folks felt like they were being slapped in the face by white folks who had the money, and said, we'll do it ourselves. And they helped do a lot of work in the community that was really fantastic, and then fell apart in about a year and a half or so because there was no ownership. So HP came to me, the company, not the foundation. That's how the world has changed, and said, we're interested in what you're doing. We like the way you're trying to help people become more self-sufficient and build capacity. If you're interested, we'll fund you times 3. And I said, well, before I say yes, what's in it for you? And they were very blunt. They said, to make money. So I'm thinking to myself, well, that's honest, but not exactly what I wanted to hear. I want to hear, helping people and that sort of thing. So I said, please, tell me more. I'm listening. And they said, we're not interested in selling them software they don't need, hardware, or anything of that nature. We just want to expose them to our name and have our branding on there so that if they become successful in business or what have you, they remember us. And I said, well, that's a fair enough trade-off. I can do that. And that's how we actually entered into all this stuff. And then from there, they looked at proposals from different cities around the country and found that these are the ones that are the most likely to move forward. And as a consequence, invested $5 million in each site. And then they asked me and my group to help assess how well are they doing. But in this case, not just how well you're doing, like a normal evaluation. It was empowerment evaluation. How do you use that data and help them assess themselves, that they learn how to monitor their own performance, so that when we go, they've built their own capacity to monitor and assess their own performance and move forward without us.
Okay, let's take each one of the cities separately and then look at them in terms of what you did and how, with the time frame, and who actually was in the cities, who's doing the monitoring there. I mean, what groups, be kind of specific about,
Yeah, and for in the big picture, just to know, I mean, folks who launched it was the head of HP, Fiorina, President Clinton, Jesse Jackson. They're the ones that helped launch this thing. And then once we got it going, I have my staff who works around the country, and they work with key directors in each of these different sites, so that in San Diego, we had the Tribal Digital Village is what it was called, and that involved 18 or 19 different tribes and had the representatives of each of these tribes come together to help run it. So the whole point of this is a little different than the typical, here's this agency that did it, here's this group, et cetera. Each city I'm going to mention is a consortium of different groups that typically compete against each other, but came together for this kind of effort. So in the case of, as I say, Tribal Digital Village in San Diego, 18 or 19 tribes got together. Some of them are affiliated with casinos. Some of them don't have casinos. Some have absolutely nothing. They all have problems with alcohol, violence, drug abuse, I mean, you name it, all different kinds of issues associated with poverty. And they came together for this initiative. Second group in East Palo Alto really consists of different groups, vested interest groups of Latinos, African Americans, and Pacific Islanders. Once again, not exactly the most friendly all the time, same as the Native Americans, a lot of different problems and difficulties and cultural baggage from years past of all sorts of issues. And I'll get to Baltimore in a second, but when I came into East Palo Alto, which is right near where I am, I said, thanks for having me here, because part of it is they had to accept us too. And I said, but I'm not here to make everybody friends and everything's wonderful. All I want to know is what your common interests are. So we asked, are you interested in education? Yes, all the way across the board. Security, because it's pretty dangerous? Yes. Housing? No. So I said, fine, we're not going to work together on housing. We're only going to work on the other two. And they got the idea. It's common vested interest. Baltimore, same sort of thing. Blacks and Wax was one of the community groups that was involved. We had the senior citizens that are involved. We had the Baltimore education system involved. So there's different groups within the city, each of these cities, that came together that don't normally work together, but thought this might be something they could bond to and also work forward with. And they all related to the different kinds of initiatives. So in Baltimore, they wanted to influence the schools, and same thing in East Palo Alto. So that's why they connected with the school system. The Tribal Digital Village didn't have as great experience with education because of the Bureau of Indian Affairs in the past, which often took the kids away from the school, from the families, and also didn't let them teach, learn their language and all that sort of thing. So they went for a different tact of really very focused interest in building the Internet for improving education, preserving their culture, that sort of thing. So they all had different tacts that based on their historical circumstances within the United States. Good.
This is a good model for the Arab-Israeli conflict, the common vested interest, seriously.
Yep, it is.
Yeah, it's a great model. I think that
would work. It would work beautifully. I lived in Israel for about a year or so, and there's no question both Arab and Israeli could get along if they focused on key common interests and accepted the fact that they don't have to be buddies or friends or family or whatever, and move on forward on those. And they're very similar, ironically. Education, security. It might be a higher level of all these things, but it's the same issues that you run across literally around the world when you deal with this. And they are using it in Israel. I've done a couple talks and workshops over there, and there are some projects we have going. We have them around the world right now, in Ethiopia, Finland, Japan, you name it. But Israel comes to mind because that's one of the more difficult ones, and it is involving folks that are going to be focused on being Palestinian, Arabs from, in this case, Jordan, and Israelis. So I'm not saying it's the entire world that are interested in that in the Middle East, but there are some nice fledgling efforts at the moment.
That's terrific. Obviously it's a great model. What about, okay, let's now get back to these three cities and get into specific stories about individual peoples or individual groups. Let's say, how long has this been going on for each one of these cities?
It's about since the year 2000, I think, something like that. So 2000 to 2001, and some of them have done extremely well. And I don't want to paint a picture of everything as rosy and perfect or anything like that.
No, talk about stuff that doesn't work, too, because that's just as important,
Let me give you some examples of, briefly I'll mention, of course, one of our stellar things is the Tribal Digital Village, because I was driving up to a different project one weekend towards Oakland, and I heard on the radio, they didn't even tell me, that the head of the FCC at the time was saying how this is one of the shining stars that they have because they built one of the largest unlicensed wireless systems in the country, unlicensed because they're a sovereign nation. And that was stellar. And they also, have a digital printing press, which is, still active and all that sort of thing. So we've had some stellar, out of the park, right out of the ballpark kind of successes. At the same time, and we've had, and then we had moderate things. At the same time, we have in Baltimore a situation which is, from my perspective anyway, kind of unheard of. They actually uninvited the sponsor, HP. HP is spending $15 million, want to come do a site visit, and they said, sorry, we don't want you right now. Well, at the time, HP was very respectful and understanding and said, they just don't want to waste our time, so they're logically looking at they haven't accomplished enough and that sort of thing, blah, blah, blah. Well, all that was a baloney because that's a very good idea and rational and sounds rational and sounds very sympathetic. And as evaluators, we also made the mistake of thinking that made sense at the time. But they invited us in, the evaluation team, because they trusted us as long as we made the deal that we wouldn't talk to HP, the sponsor, until they were comfortable with where they are, that sort of thing. And we said, fine. Well, all this sounds great, but to be honest, it was a big mistake because it gave them an institutional arrogance that basically pushed away any kind of resource that HP had to offer in terms of technical expertise, projections, people who do projections and stuff like that, and know how to build organizations because they got away with it. It's like sort of a kid getting away with something like that, and then the kid keeps on learning, oh, that works.
Okay, well, what would be an example?
Oh, yeah, they wanted to bring in folks who helped them learn how to distribute the computers very easily to the school system. And that was part of their big objective in Baltimore, to try to get the kids using computers, the teachers, and transform the curriculum in the process. Well, it did happen, but it happened at the very end of the game, near the end of some of their funding for this initial effort, when in fact, if they had them earlier and also had people who helped them with a business plan, because it's a business in terms of how you have a chain of delivery of this equipment, how do you store it somewhere, how do you then deliver it, all this stuff could have been done very easily. People like that were invited, and HP offered them for free as part of the package. And they said, no, we're small business people, we can handle it ourselves, and on and on. Every time they did that, on the one hand, you could interpret it as, oh, they're becoming more self-sufficient. But the problem was there wasn't any substance behind it first to be able to do that. Let me give you another quick example of how it's all interpretation, because when I worked in townships in South Africa as well, and I was at a township and also at squatter settlements. But at this township, I'm sitting there, and I don't know a lot about horticulture, but I know a little bit from growing up and stuff like that in Connecticut. And my mom was connected. She was a professor at the University of Connecticut, so I learned a little bit about all this stuff. So we're working on plots for gardens and that sort of thing, so they can be more self-sufficient in this settlements and stuff. And I get up from my chair and I go, oh, you might want to. And they said, David, we're all okay. We're fine. We're working on this. And the old me, in terms of an evaluator, would have been, what? I'm coming thousands of miles. I have some expertise, and you're saying sit down, basically. The new kind of me, the sense of as an empowerment evaluator, says, great, they don't need me anymore. But you see, that example is backed up by the fact that they had already gotten background information from various students from agricultural centers in the area, some faculty, some folks who actually had just practical experience, and they were building their own plots and their own design. So that one merited sitting back and being appreciative of the fact that they are becoming more self-determined. In Baltimore, it was an institutional kind of arrogance because they didn't have the wherewithal first, some basic information, before moving into sort of I can do it myself.
Well, in Baltimore, who was it? Who were the players? I mean, you described who the players were in, I guess in East Palo Alto or in San Diego, but who were the players in Baltimore?
That was the Baltimore public school system. Was one of the big ones, and then we had Blacks and Wax was a small, basically famous African American figures that are African American background. Then we had about it's sort of a kids journalist kind of group that got pulled together, and then we had these things called 6 hubs, which really meant senior citizen centers, that sort of thing. These are the kind of key players that were involved that all got together, and they were called the Baltimore Digital Village with what's called signature projects, and each one of them, and their signature project was really, in this case, handing out 300 computers to families, and then the same amount number to school system, and to sort of slowly help influence the whole school system to become more, in this case, net-based. Now, having said this, in the background, they also are training small groups who want to just become small businesses. And these are just people in the community who either have a fledgling business going or don't have any business at all, but they're setting up a business model with these folks, and they're helping sort of train them, cultivate them, and give them resources, mostly equipment, to move forward and build small businesses.
David, how do you present some of the other, not these communities, obviously, because, okay, they were suffering as a result of this digital divide. What about other, and keep it in the United States, maybe other medium-sized cities or even big cities? How do you keep them from, because things change so quickly digitally, every 18 months, at least up to this point? Like, how do you prevent communities from actually suffering or from the digital, getting to that point where they haven't kept up? Do you know what I'm saying? Rather than after the fact, but before the fact.
Yeah. There can be so much done that's preventative, and we do work in that area as well. And the key, I think, is because of this approach we use with empowerment evaluation, where we say, let's see what we can do with what we have first before asking anybody for any money. And if you look at most cities that we operate in, that we work with, there are senior centers that have computers for free. There are libraries that have computers they can use for free. Yeah, they're time limited. You have to go to the place. Are they optimal? No, but they exist. So you start creating events, activities around this that help get them more acclimated, in many cases, to using computers. You have to keep in mind, a lot of folks, it is very difficult because a lot of folks have a computer phobia, even in this day and age, because they have been separated out, pushed away from it, but it's been promoted as, the panacea for this generation. And in fact, it isn't the panacea, but it is instrumental. And as a consequence, they feel that they have failed by not being connected. So they have to get past this barrier that an empowerment evaluation works because it's very inclusive. It involves, by the way, barbecues, parties, whatever it takes to get people together. And within that context, link them up with net capacities, like, as I say, the senior citizen, the library, and many schools offer them as well to get kids connected. So first you do, as it were, a needs assessment of what's out there that we can already start tapping and using, and who has some expertise already in surfing the net, video conferencing, building web pages, et cetera, and then you start connecting them with these groups at these different events that you start creating.
It's interesting that you mentioned libraries. I have a friend who's the head of this, a huge group where she goes around to the different libraries in New York State trying to get referendums for monies because people see libraries as dinosaurs. We don't need libraries anymore. But here you're giving a perfect example of, we do need these libraries, and they do provide a resource for this empowerment in the digital divide.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people underestimate how phenomenal librarians are, actually. One of my books, I've got about 14 books I've written, and one of them is dedicated to librarians because I also evaluated the Stanford library system, so I know intimately so how critical they are, not just the ones that we see face-to-face, but the technical ones in the background, folks who take care of the old restoration stuff, you name it, are instrumental in maintaining our connection. And of course, many of them are very connected with the net and helping us connect with it for resource, for information, whatever it may be. I mean, it's made us all better consumers, which is a form of evaluation as well, by providing that information, that knowledge to us to assess which car we want, which house, whatever it may be. And of course, the ultimate one, of course, is through relationships with Match.com and other ones of that nature. Better for better or worse, they still represent another form yet of how the net reaches out to different parts of our lives. And once again, it can be through a resource of the library. It can be through a resource of a senior center. A lot of public places have them available, even though they're time limited. But librarians, I think, are fantastic. There's no question about it. We take a lot for granted without them.
Yeah, we just lost power, so I don't know what, I'm on my cell.
Oh, okay. No problem.
But there's always a cell. Here, are we talking about the digital divide?
Yeah. Talk about, this is what can happen. It all depends on the electricity.
This is what can happen, David, and this is very well planned. See, this is an example.
we put this in so the audience can see that as great as all this is, the irony is it can all fall apart once we have an electrical storm. A storm, and then electricity goes out. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm not sure what and the reason, but anyway. So we still have a few minutes. But so just what you were just finish up what you were saying because I missed the last couple of thoughts.
Yeah. No, I was just highlighting, I think, the role of, in this case, librarians. I've dedicated my book to, and one of my books that I've done about 14, and one of them was focused on them because I worked with them very closely and help get a feel for just how they get information to us. And they're very much linked up now with the net for resources and getting us connected as well, including local communities.
You know what I wanted to ask you, because we do only have a couple minutes left, but what about the digital divide amongst age groups? I know I have 3 boys who are like late 20s, early 30s, and that's one of the things, one of my kids said to me, there's really not a difference in terms of social mores and the way you dress and who, sex and all that. That's very similar. I'm a baby boomer, but the digital divide is huge. And then as you have people who are living longer in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, they have a very different, skill set as compared to people, say, in their 20s and 30s and even 40s.
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you two quick stories. I was on the plane with this young man who was really nice, and he got his parents' computer and that sort of thing. And then about a month later, he got this massive bill. And he said, what is going on here? And, well, the way we ignore pop-ups that say you have to buy this and do this, they thought it was just the computer telling them what to do, like directions, and they bought a ton of things. So for some seniors, it's very important that you treat them differently as far as an education to the system and that sort of thing. On the other hand, seniors are often more facile than anyone else because they have more time to focus in on how to use it. So you have an interesting divide even within seniors as far as use. But I think, sort of focus on the big picture of all the stuff we're talking about. From my perspective, there's, I think, a movement afoot to transform the human condition. And I think the Internet is just one tool of many, but it's a powerful one that we don't want to ignore, that we want to be able to use to all of our advantages. And that's why this big project, the $50 million investment basically, is because it's really an investment in the future. Obviously, HP has a vested interest in making sure that they benefit because more people use it, they buy their equipment, et cetera. But the reality is that they don't have to do that. It's really an investment in making sure we don't leave so many folks behind that might be productive individuals, critical individuals. And it could be the weakest link.
Do you see this, David, as an example for other big companies, say like HP, Hewlett-Packard, to also get on the bandwagon for this kind of stuff, for this kind of empowerment project?
Absolutely. I just got a piece that came out a couple of days ago in the Chronicle of Philanthropy, and it talks about these uncertain times that we have and how basically this is a tool, a model that they can use to start investing in people in a very powerful way, in a way that isn't just a hand out, but it's hand up. You're basically helping people by investing in them so they can learn how to monitor and take care of their own lives, because none of us is going to be here forever. We're going to be here to help, to assess, to help feedback loops so they can learn what's going on. And the reality is we walk away into another project, different part of our life, whatever happens, you need folks to be able to build their own capacity so they can move on into the future without us, basically.
Well, it's a great project and obviously great principles. But David, davidfetterman.com. That's the website that listeners can go to if they want more information, not only about this book. You've written how many other books? But
14 books and over 100 articles and stuff like that, and many of them I have articles and videos for free on the net. So if they want to take a look and see if this is interesting for your community, we have a ton of free guides on how to do all this stuff, and articles and information and radio interviews as well if they want to hear a little bit more about what we talk about on some of these.
Terrific. It's been great having you on the show today.
Well,
and,
thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Great talking to you. Lots of obviously interesting information. And again, davidfetterman.com, that's the website. And the title of his latest book, David Fetterman, is Employment Evaluation in the Digital Villages. Have a good day. We're going to say goodbye. I'm Kathryn Zox. I'm your social worker with a microphone, and you have been listening to VoiceAmericaVariety.com and World Talk Radio. Have a good week. We'll see you next Wednesday.
We hope you have enjoyed today's episode of The Kathryn Zox Show. You can listen live every Thursday morning at 7 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America channel. Want to know more about Kathryn? Visit her website at www.kathrynzox.com. Be sure to join us next week for more interviews and great conversations with Kathryn Zox.
Thanks again for listening to the preceding program, brought to you on the Voice America Variety Channel. For more information about our network and to check out additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit VoiceAmericaVariety.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit VoiceAmerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the preceding program are strictly those of the hosts or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.